Well, good morning and welcome to today's episode of Transformed. Today I want to talk to you about loving the imperfect.
Welcome to today's message with Pastor Jim Balzano.
And before I do, I want to thank Park Home and Made by Vogel for many of the items that you see in our studio. You know, the fact is, I don't know what it's like to not be loved. I just don't. I was fortunate to have been raised in a family where love was there. We weren't perfect, but love was there. I knew my parents loved me, even when I accused them of not loving me. Almost every child has made that accusation, right? Were my parents perfect? No. But love doesn't demand perfection. Was I the perfect child? Well, of course I was. Okay, just kidding. To be sure, I was a bit of a challenge at times in my upbringing, although it's at this point I must admit that I do think I deserve a bit of a thank you from my mother for teaching her how to pray. You know, she can accredit that to me. But anyhow, in my life, when I was less than perfect, did my parents stop loving me? Of course not. Why? They didn't, because love doesn't demand perfection. You know, I have 3 sisters whom I love, and they love me. Are they perfect? Let me be the first to tell you they are not. They're not even close. They're going to love that. All right? Did you ever argue while you were siblings? Sure you did. All right? Did you ever get into heated arguments, differences? Sure you did. Did we ever say unloving and hurtful things to each other? Of course we did. Did we ever stop loving each other? No. In years of marriage, have we ever stopped loving each other in the midst of imperfection? No. Why? Because love doesn't demand perfection. My children were loved, although I wasn't the perfect parent. I made many mistakes. They were not perfect children, and at times they did things that were disrespectful and wrong. Did we stop loving them? Of course not. Why? Because love doesn't demand perfection. You know, why is it that sometimes in the Christian world, and again, this is not something negative towards the church. I think the church is the greatest thing going. I love the church. I love the body of Christ. But sometimes I have seen in some people that love is demanding perfection from people. Wasn't that the spirit of the Pharisees? You see, look at the example of Jesus. He said that he loved his disciples. If love demands perfection, then that crew would have been unloved by Jesus shortly after they started following him. Jesus is the ultimate example of what it means to love the unloved, unlovable person, but also the imperfect. He loved a crew of guys who would never be able to love him equally in return. It wasn't because they didn't want to. It was because they didn't have the capacity to love the way Jesus does. They weren't perfect, and they weren't able to give perfect love. Many people want to receive love that is unconditional, yet they give love that is conditional. God's love for us is unconditional and perfect. But you know what's amazing? For him to love us perfectly, he had to be willing to receive our imperfect love. He loves us when we fail him. When we have moments of great faith and obedience, he doesn't love us more than when we don't. Why? His love for us didn't demand perfection. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that he's pleased with everything we do. I'm saying that despite what we do, he still loves us. So I have some questions I want to pose to you. Does your love for people require them to be perfect? You have an expectation of them, but the moment they don't fulfill it, do you respond by taking your love from them? Because they had a moment of being unlovable, you decided to take your love away. That's not God. Hey, Dad, is your love for your children conditional or unconditional? Do they have to be perfect to be loved? Do you give and take your love from them based upon their behavior? That's not God. Hey, spouses, do you love your spouse even when he or she reveals their ugly or unlovable side? Let me remind you, you have one of those as well. Pastors, oh my, us pastors. Do you want perfect sheep who will never bite you? Get a different job, because sheep bite sometimes. The fact is, we need to love them anyhow. Love them anyhow so they'll see the great shepherd. Congregants, your shepherd is going to do things that seem unloving, and at times he or she might be an unlovable jerk. But love him or her anyhow. What's the point? The point is love doesn't demand perfection, and true godly love for others is not conditional. Sometimes those are we in covenant with are the very ones who do the things that break our heart or simply make it hard to love them at the moment. Family, friends, and fellow believers have moments of being unloving and imperfect. In those moments, it's incumbent upon us, who are loved by God perfectly, to then love those who are imperfect. So here's the deal. This week, guess what? Somebody around you is going to be imperfect. Love them anyhow. Have a great week.